They dislike one another intensely, from what I understand.
If they win it, if they get to the final, they get.
I mean, ultimately what Jake Paul brings is enormous amounts of revenue to the sanctioning bodies. Whether you like Trump or you don't like Trump, there's lots about Trump that I do like, there's lots about Trump that I don't like. Raging rivalries.
I've come to like this feature. Keep Britain tidy. Do you know what? I think about that every day when I walk through London Bridge in the morning and I see how it was left the night before. Anyway, that's just me. We discuss a topic and then we decide whether or not it's bin-worthy or whether or not it stays out the bin. And this morning, I'm talking about club rivalry, tribalism. Should that ever get in the way, Simon, of doing a good deal? And my God, you did a few deals in your time in football. Most of them, I'm pretty sure, would be pretty damn good as well. But here's the thing. Did you ever consider, or did you ever actually carry out the sale of a player with a rival, a perceived rival? Did you ever do a player transaction deal? Did you ever sell or buy a player from the likes of Millwall or Charlton?
Yeah, I always felt that it was important to help Millwall survive financially by buying some of their players. I bought Darren Ward from them. I bought Tony Craig from them. A couple of million quid spent there, which back in the day would have been reasonable money for Millwall. I was quite happy to sell some of my old rubbish to my rivals if I could. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a very tribalistic business.
Yeah.
And you can't take the rules of engagement from another business and just say that actually you disassociate yourself. And of course, if you're an owner that was a fan, then you're going to have some of that in the back of your little brain, the mentality that exudes from the terraces.
So did you? You did?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
To some extent.
Right.
But you also, you look at things pragmatically. But I would buy players from rivals because if I wanted to play and the manager wanted to play, I mean, we tried to buy Bobby Zamora from Brighton, which is a major rival, but he was too much of a snivelling coward to come and play for Palace. He was worried about the reaction and the blowback for him at the time.
Morning, Bobby.
Yeah, good morning. I told him that when he came on once, and I told him that, which he didn't much like. But it's true. And that's what it was said.
Well, the reason I'm asking you, selling to your rivals, does fan sentiment come into it? There's tribalism amongst the supporters, of course, but is there tribalism in the boardroom? And if there is, should there be? Now, the reason I'm asking, Arsenal confirmed the signing of Chelsea goalkeeper Kepa for $5 million. Now, the Kepa transfer means that Arsenal have now signed a player from Chelsea in 6 of the last 7 seasons. Kepa follows David Luiz, Willian, Jorginho, Kai Havertz, Raheem Sterling in a swapping for West London for North. So, should tribalism or the fact that a near neighbour is a competitor, should that ever come into it?
But every team that you sell to, if they're in the same division as you, is a competitor, right?
Yeah.
So there's always that edge to things. And there's a manufactured rivalry, and then there's a deep-seated rivalry. So if you look at, say, Chelsea and Arsenal, that's a rivalry being brought up over the last 20-odd years because Chelsea have been so predominant in English football. But it's not a deep-seated dislike, say as there is between perhaps Chelsea and Tottenham. They dislike one another intensely, from what I understand. So, but from that metric, how many players are getting something? We've seen a few go back between Chelsea and Tottenham. We saw William Gallas, didn't we? Didn't he go from Chelsea to Tottenham? Wasn't it something like that?
He's been everywhere, and Arsenal.
But I think again, it depends upon the ownership models. When you've got ownerships now that are from the far-flung corners of the world, they won't feel it. They'll look at the business side of things. If there's only a few real raging rivalries. That absolutely prohibit common sense. I remember years ago, I think Liverpool, Gabriel Heinze was at Manchester United. And Liverpool wanted him, and an intermediary got in touch with me to try and get me to buy Gabriel Heinze from Palace. They'd then flip it out and send him to Liverpool. And I remember I talked to David Gill about it and said, this is what's going on. So just be mindful, and by the way, you owe me one. Because that was a mentality to get around a rivalry.
And he went to Liverpool.
But he didn't go through Liverpool. He didn't go through...
Not through Palace.
Through Palace.
Right.
So whether they found a different mechanism to do it at the time, that they approached me to do it and use me as a gatekeeper, which didn't seem much sense because we just got relegated, so it didn't seem like a deal that Gabriel Heinze would want to do anyway.
You said a polite no.
But no, because I also thought I didn't like the way that the agent was operating.
Right.
But I think we're in this day and age where you've got... how many deals are you going to see between Arsenal and Tottenham? How many deals are you going to see between the major rivals in football clubs?
Well, we might see one that will spark a lot of chat, and chat of not of the good sort. West Ham fans, some of them are balking on social media big time at the idea that the West Ham board, Mr. Sullivan, would even entertain the prospect of doing business with Tottenham in a transfer over Mohamed Kudus. Now, this is gathering pace. Kudus had a good season last season, caught the eye.
Canuti went between the two clubs, didn't he?
Yeah, but hang on. They're not having it. Many of the West Ham fans on social media that I have seen are saying, "Are you joking? Do not dare sell Kudus to Tottenham." And it might happen in a deal that would be worth 60 million to West Ham.
But they're not having it because they don't like Sullivan as well, right? So it's the mix of Sullivan being in the mix. So, I mean, I look at this and say, well, why are you so offended? Why are you so offended specifically? Are you offended at the transfer? Are you offended at the transfer going to Spurs? There's no massive rivalry between West Ham and Tottenham, is there? They're London football clubs. They're both in the same division. But is there this massive rivalry? I don't recall there being one.
We might put that out there, put it to the test this morning.
Do you know any Happy Hammers?
We should ask a Happy Hammer out there. I mean, are you one of the West Ham fans this morning who has been on social media saying, "Do not, over my dead body, allow this to happen"? West Ham could well sell Mohamed Kudus, who is a good player and had a good season, to Tottenham in a deal that would be worth 60 million. Are you one of the West Ham fans who are saying, no, not to them, or not at all? 03717 223344 81089. Kudus, interestingly, Simon, would be the first West Ham player to join Tottenham since Scott Parker back in 2011. So it's not something that's been happening a lot, that's for sure.
But that might tell you something about where West Ham have been as a football club.
Yeah.
In terms of the amount of players. I mean, obviously there's been some good players in there that have gone on to other places, like Dimitri Payet, who was a bit of a rebel, wasn't he, went out the door. But maybe Tottenham haven't coveted any of their players. Tottenham were a bigger club than West Ham.
Right. So this idea that you don't sell to a neighbour or a rival, do we put this one in the bin? Is this a nonsense issue?
I think it probably, on the commercial world that we live in now, is probably more nonsense.
It's going in the bin.
Valuable.
It's bin worthy, and that's all thanks to Keep Britain Tidy. But are you a West Ham fan who would say, no, not Kudus to Tottenham, even if it brings in your club 60 million? Many people saying to me, Mohamed Kudus to Tottenham. Yeah, there's one. Jim, I'm a West Ham fan. I would drive him there. 60 million, are you kidding? Didn't have a great season last season. So maybe West Ham fans are not as up in arms about selling to a London rival. If it is a case
on our part.
If confected outrage. If it is the case that he's going to end up at Tottenham in a £60 million deal. We shall see, though. We shall see. There's time, certainly, in this window. Simon, would it be somewhat ironic if a World Cup in the Western world ended up causing more human rights debates than the one in the Middle East?
No.
Well,
because we self-flagellate in the West. We delight in telling everyone how awful we are when actually we're not at all. So it doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
The reason I'm mentioning this is this. After all his frolicking and sucking up to the US President Donald Trump in recent months, has the FIFA President Gianni Infantino opened the door to football's greatest show on earth being hijacked by activists? Is he fair game after dancing with the devil? Let me put some meat in the bones of this. Infantino has received a letter signed by over 90 civil society groups, the majority of which are based in the US, expressing deep concern about immigration policies and enforcement measures in the US and their potential impact on the World Cup in 2026.
Let
me finish. The letter urges FIFA to use its influence to call on the administration of President Trump to guarantee the fundamental rights of the millions of football fans who will seek to attend the World Cup in the US next summer. Now, the groups reference Infantino's high-profile engagements with the White House of late and his recent trip to Saudi Arabia and Qatar when he accompanied Trump at an investment summit as evidence of his proximity to the US president. So you can't deny, no one can deny, that Infantino has been cozying up big time to Trump.
He cozies up to the Qataris. He cozies up to the Russians. This is what he does when he's got a tournament on their soil. Isn't it funny that we had the two?
It was at Trump's inauguration.
We had the two professors because they've got two massive tournaments coming up, and they're two worldwide stages that Trump would like to be seen on. So of course he's going to be there, and whether I like it or not, it's a commercial reality and a pragmatic reality of the circumstances. Isn't it funny that we had these two intellectual professors talking about the circumstances and talking about how the World Cup was going to be amplified by Trump to highlight his immigration policies, when in fact what they're going to do is amplify their resistance through football fans going to the World Cup. So the argument is, and let's just make sure we're right on this, Trump was elected with an electoral college majority to be able to enforce the immigration policies of his country. People in that country don't like it, And so they're going to use the world stage.
Yeah, but the
and a World
professors
Cup.
took you to task on that big time,
Well,
didn't
of course they did.
For those who missed it.
Of course they did.
We had two New York professors on the other day, and they locked horns with Simon on this because obviously with a huge influx of visitors to the US, the immigration issue in the US, which is highly visible at the moment with these ICE individuals in the street, putting people in the backs of vehicles.
Well done there.
It's going to be extremely visible next summer, and it's going to be a huge talking point, as the professors made clear to Simon just the other day. Have a listen.
You've got a democratically elected president brought in on a mandate specifically around immigration, just taking hardline policies because he means it, and you're suggesting that ultimately the rest of the world should boycott that on the back of that. I think it's nonsense.
There's a big difference. There's a big difference, okay, between a country being a human rights violator, which every country in the world, right, has a track record. There's no country that's free of any human rights violations.
Correct.
I personally I have not called for the boycott of Qatar. I have not called, even though I despise their policies. I think they're very problematic.
But lots of voices did.
Here, what's happening, I'm not done. Here, what's happening is that he's using this specifically as a platform to amplify these policies. It's the opposite of sports washing. If the
But that's how you see it. But that's how you see it.
We're not Guardian journalists. Actually, we're CUNY professors. But
Fantastic.
if the Guardian editor who had allowed us to write, we had actually called it sports dirting, where it's a use of this platform to amplify certain policies. Now, you might think those are good policies. That's fine. That is your political position. But what I'm talking about are empirical facts, which is the fact of the fan experience, the fact of what's happening outside the stadiums. And those facts do not fit your narrative which is, by the way, a Trump narrative. You're actually repeating his talking points.
Now,
see, the interesting point of that was, right, just before we go on to what you're going to say, the empirical data that Heckel and Keckel relied upon, empirical data is a case study based upon historic reference. Their empirical data was 2 days of the World Club Championship. 2 days. Because when we did that interview, the World Club Championship had been going on for 2 days. So their empirical evidence, which they were so very proud to suggest to me, counteracted my argument about Trump and his attitude and outlook and what football fans were going to experience, was based upon 2 days of football attendances, which is not empirical data, is anecdotal. So it's utter nonsense. They don't like Trump's policies.
Infantino has had a letter from these 90 civil society groups.
Yeah.
In it, there's a line: increased immigration enforcement actions have contributed to widespread fear and uncertainty. That's now. Can you imagine how the intensity around this debate will be so ramped up
Background noise.
when the games start in the US next year?
Infantino would have got hold of that letter and filed it under miscellaneous.
Well, it wasn't background noise in Qatar, was it?
Well, it was, because it didn't stop anything. It didn't achieve anything. Background noise. Empty vessels making loads of noise. The tournament went on. Everyone who went there, even the hypocrites that were outraged by it, like Lineker, were there, that had worked for Al Jazeera before, yet being offended by what was happening over there. The tournament went ahead. They didn't play the opening ceremony on the BBC. Who cares? And ultimately, a tournament was raved about in football terms.
Infantino got caught up in the whole thing.
But the tournament...
In Qatar, he stood up and addressed everybody and said, "Today I feel gay." He's going to be. What's he going to say in the US?
I can't legislate. Today I feel like an illegal immigrant. I don't know if he's going to say that, right? The fact of the matter
he's capable of that.
Trump's policies are the policies of a country that he's been elected. These people that are objecting to him, I suspect, are ideologically not aligned with him. Whether you like Trump or you don't like Trump, there's lots about Trump that I do like. There's lots about Trump that I don't like. What I do like is if you've got a policy on illegal immigration, which a lot of countries should have, then you should be able to enforce it. And he's enforcing it. When you talk about the 12 countries that are banned currently, they'll probably all be in a situation in a year's time where they won't be. The fact of the matter is there's bloody good reasons why these 12 countries are banned. Most of it is because they've got 60 to 70% recidivism on visa abuse, i.e. people going into that country and overstaying their visas. So you should enforce border policies. You should protect your country. You should have illegal immigration and illegal aliens in your country. And I think Trump is right to do it. Now, even
though many of the immigrants will be working in the World Cup, during the World Cup, in host cities doing a decent job.
But that's a different argument entirely. They shouldn't be working... If the policy of the country, as put forward by a democratically elected president, without trying to delve into politics too much, is that you cannot work in a country if you're an illegal immigrant, that's the end of the discussion. And all these bleeding hearts liberals in America that are probably Democrats that are ideologically and every other way opposed to Trump are now going to do the very thing that they say Trump is. Trump is not using the World Cup to amplify his immigration policies. Trump is already doing it.
He's already doing it, but the intensity around it is going to rise and rise and rise come the World Cup next year.
The intensity around it by those that have a different agenda is going to rise and rise and rise. And the bottom line is that, quite frankly, in this world that we live in, I would quite like to know, in an international event where terrorism is at the front of a lot of people's minds right now, certainly the terrorists, I'd like to make sure that the authorities know who's inside football stadiums and who I'm sitting next to. I might gain some comfort from that. And the only people that need to be fearful of Trump's policies are the illegal immigrants and these other individuals that are sat there with their ideological differences. I mean, that we didn't campaign against Qatar. We didn't campaign against Russia. Oh, you didn't, did you? So you're talking about a democratically elected president. No, I'm talking about these two professors that came on with their holier-than-thou attitude and their empirical data that went back 48 hours. I'm looking at it and saying, so you didn't say anything about the injustices in Qatar. You didn't say anything about Russia that's gone on and invaded in Europe, is potentially causing war in Europe. But now, because Trump's running an immigration policy that you don't like and you don't like Trump, you're going to use the World Cup to impart your message.
Do you think some of the players will demonstrate,
of course they will,
either on or off the field of play, at the immigration policies being exercised by Trump?
No, I don't. And when it comes upon them, if they did like last time, we're all for this, yellow card. Oh, maybe not so
much. Well, they weren't afraid to message in Qatar.
They were, until they got a yellow card.
Anyway, we'll see the numbers who show up for the World Cup, because there has been evidence of reduced inbound travel to the US. A 40% reduction in travel to the US at the moment. We'll see how it goes.
I'm sure there is.
We'll see how it looks.
I'm sure.
I mean, who fancies walking into a stadium and then you're questioned as to should you or should you not be in this country at this time?
You're not questioned. You're asked to produce your documentation.
And then you end up, if you're not, you end up in the back of a vehicle.
And you well know, that's propaganda. The fact of the matter is, that's propaganda.
Not in the news. It wasn't propaganda in the news bulletins I watched last night.
Well, there's lots of propaganda.
What do they call it? You end up in... There's lots
of propaganda in the newspapers, and when we dig beneath it and we actually find what's really gone on, it's far different. And there's also some accuracy. I concede that point. But if I'm going into the World Cup, and of course it's, for those that want to make this point, because I'm a white cisgender male, according to our little mate in Chicago the other day, it won't affect me, right? But the fact of the matter is, if I'm sat in a stadium, I'm quite happy to be able to produce my papers, knowing that the governance of the country. You go in, hang on, like Arnold Schwarzenegger said the other day, you're a guest in our country. I was a guest in America, and I was afforded a wonderful opportunity to be successful, and I will always remain a guest in America. So we should remind ourselves of that when we go into other countries' environment, specifically a democratic
no one's going to argue with Arnie. But here's the thing: do you not think Infantino, to a degree, has made a rod for his own back here by being so cosy with Trump? So cosy.
Right.
He's almost get a picture with me now. Here he is again. Get a picture with me now.
So what about all of the world leaders around the world? Do you not think all of them are made rod for their own back? Do you not think Keir Starmer bearing his head up Donald Trump's backside and giving him a royal visit is in fact,
politicians maybe, that's part of their job.
But he's a politician.
Infantino's the head of FIFA.
He's a politician.
Oh, is he?
Of course he is.
He runs a game.
Yeah, as a politician, part of being in a position of great
he's not
influence.
running a country. This
is a power group. He's not running a country, but there's political requirements of him, political thinking, diplomatic approaches. Look at the way that these big organisations have to be run. They have to be run with diplomacy. Diplomacy is a facet of politics. So with that in mind, Gianni Infantino...
Diplomacy? Did you say diplomacy and Trump in the same breath?
No, but I'm not talking about Trump. I'm talking about Infantino. Infantino is having to do that, whether you like it or not. And we all know that Donald Trump is getting smoke blown up his backside by everybody. And sometimes you sit there and go, come on, pack it in. But that's what they do because they recognise the animal that they're dealing with. And so Infantino is no different. His World Cup... The interesting thing is, when we were in Qatar, you and I sat there and went, oh, hang on a second, what a FIFA, the Vatican State. They stopped the roads, everyone's got FIFA regulations, FIFA laws, FIFA this. We were like, pack your football tournament. Now, there is some centering back into reality when they go into America because there isn't FIFA like the Vatican State. FIFA are putting on a football tournament in Donald Trump's country.
Okay. Stefan Borson, FFP expert, that and a whole lot more. Stefan joins us live in studio. Stefan, good morning to you.
Good morning.
This is a busy one.
Any penalty that you take for previous seasons is taken into account when you then look at subsequent seasons. that are connected to the same breach.
Right.
So Leicester is a very complicated situation with multiple moving parts until it settles down from the various cases that they've got. So I just use them as a caveat. But I think everybody else, and of course Villa were the big one that was anticipated to have a challenge. And sure enough, they did what we expected them to do, which is on the women's team.
So we'll get to that in a second. Maybe apart from Leicester, have other clubs learnt from the past?
Yeah, everybody's obviously desperate to avoid points deduction. And points deductions to focus the mind on PSR, and then laid on top of that, of course, the magical workings of Chelsea's accountants and lawyers have doubly focused the mind in terms of finding ways that you can avoid a breach. And when we were last talking a couple of weeks ago, we said PSR, following Chelsea's women's team sale, PSR is dead. And sure enough, this confirms it.
So Chelsea sold the women's team for what, 200 million?
Yeah.
Aston Villa sold their women's team for 55 million. Women's football teams deciphering that it's fair market value. How do you do that?
Well, very difficult. I mean, it's like, how do you value anything? And we could sit in this room and the three of us can have a different view of the value of women's football as a whole, individually, a player, the tournament. Some of us will be interested in the Euros that are happening right now, and some of us will think that the stadium will be filled with free tickets. So how do you value anything? But in this situation, Chelsea have gone out there and said, well, we are going to value ourselves at a premium point, the multiple that compares with Angel City in the US. We're going to also go to the US and find a third party that's prepared to validate our valuation. In fact, he came in higher than the valuation that they put it through the books. And that gives the Premier League no choice but to approve the valuation at 200 million. I think Aston Villa's perspective is slightly different in that the club is clearly not as successful as Chelsea women's, clearly is some way behind in its evolution as a kind of property. And probably when they went to market to try and find a third party, the valuation that they were given by third parties was at a lower level. And when it was at a lower level, they thought, well, look, we don't need to take a chance. We only need, let's say, 55 from a PSR perspective. So let's go with 55.
So they settled on that. And do the Premier League, Stephen, take those amounts and put it to a panel?
Well, they have to go...
Or do they just accept them?
No, there's a valuation process. So it has to be fair market value. And there is a whole process around fair market value. So they will usually seek third-party validation for that valuation. They'll ask for the clubs to give them effectively their paperwork. So Aston Villa will have had to go to their auditors and had a conversation with the auditors to say, well, we're going to put this through the books for this current year. You're going to need to check it as part of the audit process that's coming up in the autumn, but this is what we're thinking. Just confirm we're not going to have a problem and you're going to sign it off, because what we don't want is a problem down the line where the auditors say it's not fair market value, and then they go to the league and the league goes through a similar sort of process.
I see. Crystal Palace fans asking me, Stephen Borson's in studio, what is the latest in the John Textor situation? We're going to do that. Stephen's going to stay on the other side of the upcoming 11:30 break. The Club World Cup, Stephen, what has been value for money for City and Chelsea in terms of numbers thus far? I mean, City went out. We know that. What did they walk away with? What might Chelsea?
Yeah, well, they're both actually about 50. So because City got a higher initial payment, City got around 35 just for turning up. Then City won 3 games. That's $2 million a game. And then they got through to the round of 16. So they did about $50 million. And because Chelsea had a slightly lower entry fee and also won 2 games, not 3, they're also, now that they've qualified for the round of 16 and the quarterfinal, they're around the same as City. So around about $50 million. But of course, if you look at Chelsea's half of the group, there's a pretty good chance Chelsea can get to the final. Now, Chelsea, if they get to the final, will get about another 40. And if they can win again, they'll get about another 40 on top. So the total that you can win, if I've done my maths correctly on that, well, I may have overshot it slightly, but the total they can win is $125. Right? So Chelsea, if they win it, if they get to the final, they get about 95, maybe a little bit, slightly under, maybe 85. And if they win it, they get another 40. So
that's lovely. Nice money if you can get it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, you just have to slightly concern yourself with what impact does it have next season? Well, that's the great unknown. And also, don't forget the costs. Now, most people forget the costs here. They're not getting any gate receipts. All the gate receipts are going off to FIFA and the organisers. So this is not a situation where you've got a game in your stadium. You're not getting any revenue there. And you've got a huge amount of costs. These teams have taken maybe 70 people, maybe 5 staff for a month to the US. I mean, that is costing them an absolute fortune.
Yeah, if you win
millions of pounds. Of course, if you win it, yeah. Don't get me wrong. I mean, clearly, if you look...
Interesting to see what players are getting bonus out of it.
Well, and this is the great unknown, isn't it? So how have they got the players engaged? You would have thought that they've given them some very hefty bonuses.
Yeah.
But then were the players organised enough to because it all happened very late.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not actually probably in their contracts. If you think about what's in their contracts, it might be the old style Club World Cup in a lot of them. Yeah. So were the players organised enough to get themselves together as soon as Infantino got his $1 billion from Newcastle's owners, ironically, as soon as he got that $1 billion, were they quick enough to get round the table and have some impressive negotiations with management?
So Manchester City, 50 million to the good, not bad for 2 weeks' work. Chelsea, 50 million to the good, but if they end up winning it, 100 million to the good. But they've got Palmeiras of Brazil coming up next. The other side of 11:30, we'll talk about Palace, Textor, Lyon, all of that. Stefan Borson's in studio with Simon this morning. UEFA confirmed that they're postponing their decision on whether or not Palace can play in the Europa League next season until the outcome of Lyon's appeal over their relegation to the French second division is reached. Now, in a bid to satisfy UEFA multi-club rules, and this is what this is all about, the man in the middle of all of this, John Textor, has since sold his Palace shares to the New York Jets owner Woody Johnson, while this week he announced that he'd be stepping down as a president and board member of Lyon. There's a lot of moving parts to this story. Stefan's going to put it all into perspective for us now. These Palace fans, all they want to know, in my view quite rightly, Stefan, is enough of all this. Are we playing Europa League football or not? What can we tell them?
I'm in a slightly different place from Simon's view, as that UEFA haven't yet made their decision. I mean, I think you have to.
What do you think?
Well, I just think you have to take a step back. The only way it gets to the CFCB, where it is now, the adjudicatory chamber, is if the chief investigator thinks on the face of it there is a breach of Article 5. Okay? So on the face of it, he has recommended a review by the CFCB, which is now thinking about the Lyon and Crystal Palace situation, has done for a number of weeks. There's clearly a problem. So although most of the outside world thinks, how is it possible that he's got decisive influence when we know he's not got more than 25% of the voting rights? He said he hasn't done anything in terms of making day-to-day decisions. He's told everybody everything, John Textor, he's told everything he's told them. So how can it possibly be the case that the CFCB still think that he might have decisive control?
So how is there still a problem?
Well, they clearly do still think that, because if they didn't, first of all, it would never have got to the CFCB, the UEFA adjudicatory chamber. It is there. The fact it's there and they haven't said it's fine tells you they're not comfortable yet that Crystal Palace can play in the same tournament as Lyon. They're therefore waiting to see if Lyon are playing in that tournament. Unfortunately, I think the natural reading of that situation is that they are not convinced. And if Lyon are playing in the Europa, Crystal Palace will not. That's the natural reading. Otherwise, they would have already dismissed the case as having no conflict either way with Lyon. So, unfortunately, I do think that it is dependent on Lyon at the moment. Now,
you sound pessimistic from a Palace viewpoint.
I just think it's gone... This should have been dealt with weeks ago. This has been going on weeks. So, the fact you got to Monday and they said, well, let's see what happens with Lyon, surely that tells you that they are not convinced that there is no conflict. They believe there's a conflict after all of the submissions. So, and this is part of the problem. Nobody believes John Textor anymore. Okay, so John Textor has gone to the French DNTG, the financial regulator in France, told them a whole load of things that are going to happen this year. Promises have been made and they haven't been fulfilled. He's gone to them and told them about the sale of Palace. But the reality of the sale of Palace is it is not complete until it's complete. And it can't be complete until the Premier League approve it. And we know from both the Everton situation and the Manchester United situation, those are cases that took between 2 and 3 months for the owners' test to be passed by the Premier League. Now, maybe the Premier League are going to flush it through very quickly this week. And if they do, then that might make things a bit easier with the UEFA situation. But the likelihood is the completion of that transaction is not going to happen until a little bit later, maybe 2 or 3 weeks after the decision needs to be made. Now, so unfortunately, people don't believe Textor. They don't believe Textor has no influence. Textor apparently went to the CFCB and said, "Oh yeah, I was involved in the Glasner appointment.
The appointment.
Yeah, I've always rated him, always wanted him. If he spoke French, or if I had a vacancy, something like this, then I'd have appointed him at Lyon." He said this openly. And then Crystal Palace said, "Oh, hang on a minute, that's not true." And now Crystal Palace have had to make submissions of emails and kind of internal conversations that they had at their end to say that what Textor told the CFCB wasn't right. But of course, he's undermined his own position by being sloppy with his communication to these regulators.
You're nodding, Simon.
Yeah, I mean, the point I made...
Simon won't mind me saying this. He's in contact with Textor. But you're hearing Stefan. Yeah, nobody's believing the guy anymore.
I think that's probably right. But that doesn't alter the premises of the conversations I've had with Julian Laurent about debt and structuring and so on and so forth of that nature. The question for me and the point I was making was not quite that UEFA don't think there's a case to answer, is that UEFA are waiting for a decision that has to be made by them. Because if Olympic Lyon are sanctioned by their own governing authorities and drop down a league, then UEFA don't have to make a decision. They can allow Crystal Palace to be in a competition, potentially, because Lyon have discounted themselves without them having to do anything. That was the kind of point I was making yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, that's 100% clear that if Lyon get relegated,
they can't play in it.
They won't play in the Europa. They won't play in any tournament.
And then
Crystal Palace will.
And then UEFA don't have to make a decision, which was the point I'm making. But the argument now seems to be raging. I'm talking to the French journalist yesterday about the reality of he believes, and so does Textor, that they will re-establish Lyon's position in Ligue 1, that they've got no grounds, this quasi-independent panel, to do what they're doing. They'll re-establish it. Yet there's a perception ruminating amongst the media that both clubs will find a way through this and both clubs will be able to play in the Europa League. That's what's now coming out of France.
Is there a way through it for Palace? If Lyon stay in Ligue 1 and aren't relegated, are Palace still looking good to play in the Europa League?
Yeah, so and it's going to happen quickly, I would imagine, on this appeal in France. So the way it works in French football is it won't go to CAS. It will go to another various French appeals. They will make a decision on Lyon. If Lyon stay in Ligue 1, I think UEFA then say, we think there's a conflict and Crystal Palace have to play, let's say, in the conference.
Oh, gee.
I think that's what will happen.
Palace will appeal it.
Palace will then go to CAS.
Yeah.
Right? They can't go to it doesn't look like you can go to the UEFA Appeal Committee because it's what's known as an urgent case. And so they'll need to go straight to CAS, as the Irish team did.
Yep.
That will be decided over a couple of days.
Yep.
And then they'll make a decision. But I think it's going to be quite hard.
The Premier League can be facilitatory, can't they? I mean, ultimately, I know there's a process to go through, but the Premier League have a part to play in this, don't they? Because if they want to look at the fit and proper persons test, they can look at the fit and proper persons test, knowing who Woody Johnson is, knowing his background. They can get there relatively quickly, can't they?
Well, look, I think it would massively help them. While before the decision has actually formally been made, if they approve the sale and Textor no longer owns it, they put the evidence to the CFCB. They say, well, actually, Lyon did get put back into Ligue 1, but of course now Textor is no longer the owner. We never made our decision.
Yeah.
Premier League has sorted it out for us because Textor is no longer involved. And of course, then in that case, both teams can operate
which is maybe what UEFA are trying to achieve.
I know, but the time scale doesn't seem to work.
The time scale's the worry, isn't it?
It's really tight. I think, you're talking days. Maybe the Premier League are going to do Crystal Palace a massive favour and really push it through very quickly.
You look at these things as you look at everything forensically. There's not an I that isn't dotted or a T that isn't crossed. What is the percentage probability as we sit here now that Palace will play Europa League football next season?
It's very hard to say because I just don't know what the French situation is very hard to decipher from the outside. So even the Lyon fans, I've been looking at a lot of the Lyon forums and the knowledgeable fans and the people that are reading everything about that case, and even they really don't know. And there are no written reasons from the DNCG as to why they concluded as they have. It's not just about the debt, as Simon says, and in his argument with Julien Laurent, it's not just about the headline of the debt. The debt is mainly about the stadium. It's not just that. It's much more about actually the viability of Lyon's financial position going forward. And Textor probably will speak to Simon afterwards whether I'm right or wrong. I just get the sense that the DNCG and the French don't believe anything Textor tells them anymore about what's going to happen over there. And if they don't believe him, they can't trust that they will be in a financially strong position next season.
I hope we've
that's
got
what they're
good
worried
news
about.
for Palace fans soon. I really do. Stefan, thanks as always for everything there. The next for Jake Paul could be Anthony Joshua.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any credibility in that. I mean, ultimately what Jake Paul brings is enormous amounts of revenue to the sanctioning bodies. I mean, sticking him in at number 14 in the cruiserweights tells you one of two things. Either the organisation is devoid of any principles and integrity, which is entirely plausible, who put him in that position, or in fact, the cruiserweight division is not very deep in talent, or a combination of the two. I mean, he's not been in with a live one. He went in against a washed-up Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. I mean, he's been in with a couple of ex-combat fighters, MMA guys. So, he can hold his hands up. Everyone knows he can hold his hands up. But when you talk to the boxing people, they'll tell you that he doesn't technically have any real ability. Paulie Malignaggi was talking about it yesterday. And everyone's quite desperate to see him get a punch on the nose because they know that he's been in choreographed events.
Well, let's get more on that, actually, Simon. I mentioned Turkey. Let's head out there now. Why are we going to Turkey? Later on this afternoon on the talkSPORT Boxing YouTube channel, you're going to get live boxing from Turkey, where Liverpool's Jazza Dickens fights for the IBA Pro Super Featherweight title. Let's head to Turkey now. The IBA Pro Convention is underway. I'm delighted to say waiting to speak to us is one David Hay. David, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, guys.
Good to speak to you. Your weather looks better than the weather we're getting here today. David, I'll talk about the IBA Pro Convention in a second. Simon and I were just talking moments ago about Jake Paul, now officially ranked by the WBA. What is your reaction to that?
I think it's great. If he wants to do professional boxing, then he fights professional boxers, and obviously he's going to be looked at favourably when it comes to the rankings. So if he's in the rankings, he's got to continue now fighting fighters in the rankings, so we'll find out exactly how good he is. So I think it's a good thing, because I think lots of people who wouldn't be interested in boxing are now interested in boxing because Jake Paul's doing boxing. If he was doing darts, they'd be interested in darts. He has such a big fan base. Anything that brings fans to boxing, young fans, I'm all for. And he fought Chavez the other day. Obviously Chavez is Chavez, but it was a professional boxer who was once a world champion, and he won the fight convincingly. So he's fighting real boxers now, and they've chucked him into the top 15 rankings. So let's see what he can do.
Do you think, David, it's a good thing for him? Because what we've seen at this moment in time is a load of exhibition fights. It's one thing, being able to throw punches against people that can't as much throw them back. Now he goes into a live situation. Do you think it's a good thing for him, David?
I think it's a great thing. If he genuinely believes and wants to be the world champion, then he's on the right path. He's doing what he needs to do. He's obviously got to step up his opposition. Chavez, who's a former middleweight champion from 10 years ago, it's not what he's going to be competing against. The Badu Jacks of the world and the fighters that he's going to need to beat to win world titles. But it's a step closer than the MMA guys he was fighting previously.
Some of the great and the good are going to be gathering with you over there in Turkey, the IBA Pro Convention. Spencer Oliver is going to join us later on and is going to explain more about that. What is your first impression of what you find yourself in there today, David? What's going on? What's it like?
They've brought in all of the big guns. You've got Tyson Fury, they've got Crawford, Cannon, Shannon, Derek Chisora's over there. You've got everyone in boxing are here to see what they're about. They did a convention talking about how they want to. It's not just about professional boxing. They're invested like 25 million into amateur boxing, funding countries that don't have infrastructure. Really a big push on female amateur boxing to fund this talent from these countries that don't have the means to then turn professional one day and fight for the IBA title. And the thing that sort of struck a nerve with me was like, okay, they're a new governing body, and everyone's like, do we need a new governing body? But they don't want to compete. They want to work in conjunction with others as more of a, I don't know, it's a more holistic way of doing boxing. I know everyone's confused from boxing as there is WBA, WBC, IBF, WBO. So IBA now is in the mix, and what they're doing, which is quite interesting, is they're creating a gold belt. It's like 4 kilogram solid gold belt with diamonds in it for the champion. So I can guarantee you, instead of paying a sanctioning fee, 3% of your sanctioning fee, they're going to give you a belt that's worth probably a lot more than what the sanctioning fee you was having to pay. So it's an interesting way to go about it, but I'm pretty sure, you know, Tyson Fury is up on stage talking. He said he wants to fight for that belt.
I'll bet he
does. They're going about it the right way. They've really heavily invested in this infrastructure. I haven't seen anything like it, to be honest.
Interesting,
David. It's interesting to see. It's very interesting.
Yeah, you've set the scene beautifully for us, mate. We're going to get more from Spencer shortly. 2 fighters, I would presume, who are too busy to be there would be Daniel Dubois and Alexander Usyk, who go head-to-head again very soon. We know what happened last time. Daniel failed in his bid to topple Usyk. What do you think, David, before you leave us? Second guess it for me this time, because it's fast approaching.
Yeah, I thought the first time Daniel had an opportunity that he was going to sort of grab it by the scruff of the neck, and outside of the low blow / borderline punch that had some effect, that was pretty much all he brought to the table in that fight. He was too respectful. We kept it too long range. The fight he had against AJ, very different from that, imposing himself, putting the pressure on, really bringing the heat, because he's a big, strong, rough, tough, got a great chin. He's got all the attributes, and he was able to implement them on AJ and show how good he was. If he comes to the fight with that mindset, just like Chisora did when he fought Usyk, you know, showed him respect, but when it came to closing the range down and bringing the heat, Derek had the best fight against Usyk than anyone's had. It's because he closed the range and worked inside. If Dubois can really impose himself and don't get involved in a boxing match, he's got a shot. Usyk's had those last 4 fights, you know, 2 fights against AJ, 2 fights, you know, against Tyson Fury, hard fights that he won, weren't life and death, but think of the training camp he had to have those 4 fights, the big guys he was sparring. I know it's like sparring big guys, it takes a lot out of you. Has he taken too much out of himself? He's never lost before, undisputed cruiserweight, undisputed heavyweight, but at some stage you can't, it doesn't work anymore. I found that out. At some stage you can't do what you wanted to do. Nothing suggests he's that comes that close from his last fight. But when he's fighting a young, rough, tough Daniel Dubois with lots of confidence, who's been in there, knows what it's like, you know, he's got a shot. He's got a massive shot. But how do you bet against someone who's never lost? He doesn't know what it's like to lose. But I think if there's ever for Dubois to beat someone like Usyk, it's now with the momentum he's got, you know, at home. He's got everything in his favour, and you know, Usyk has got nothing to gain really, because he's already beat. But he done the same thing with Tyson Fury and AJ. Gave them both rematches and done it better the second time round. So I'm really intrigued in this fight, and you know, everyone's going to be behind Daniel Dubois. You know, he's a great guy.
Sure.
Straight down the line, but he's fighting a wizard. He's fighting someone who doesn't know what it's like to lose, and yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we get another Usyk victory, but I also wouldn't be surprised if Usyk starts showing signs of age. Hard training camps, all those amateur fights, world championships, amateur, the WSB, he's basically done so much.